Imagine waking one morning to a body that feels foreign, heavy, drained, as though an unseen force has been siphoning your very essence throughout the night. You glance in the mirror, only to see exhaustion deeply etched into your features. Yet the reason remains baffling. This isn't mere depression, nor is it simply burnout. This profound malaise is a phenomenon Carl Jung meticulously documented across decades of his clinical practice, labeling it the empath's slow death. And here's the truly chilling revelation. Most empaths remain oblivious to this internal decay until they're perilously close to the point of no return. Today, I'm going to unveil how empaths orchestrate their own healing by unlocking what Jung famously called the awakened empath. Because the true secret is far removed from what you might assume. It's not about merely protecting your energy or diligently setting better boundaries. It's about embracing something significantly more perilous and infinitely more potent. Jung's private case files unearthed a pattern that genuinely astonished him. Patient after patient arrived at his clinic presenting an identical constellation of symptoms. Chronic fatigue that sleep could not alleviate. A hollow ache in the chest, as if something vital had been meticulously carved out. And the pervasive sensation of existing as a phantom in their own life. These were not random occurrences. These were empaths who had given so profoundly of themselves that they had utterly forgotten the path back to wholeness. But here's the insight that caused Jung's hands to tremble as he meticulously penned his notes. These empaths weren't just weary. They had, in his words, morphed into emotional black holes, unconsciously absorbing everyone else's sorrow, fury, and despair, all while inadvertently surrendering their own precious life force. They were dying from the inside out, completely unaware of the silent demise consuming them. Jung identified this condition as undifferentiated perception, recognizing it as a stealthy, invisible killer. An empath walks into a room and instantly absorbs the palpable weight of everyone's concealed suffering. The mother's quiet desperation, the father's deeply buried rage, the siblings' unspoken jealousy. While most individuals possess internal walls designed to filter this onslaught of information, empaths often have what amount to open wounds. Every raw emotion circulating in the room pours into them, much like water relentlessly floods a sinking vessel. And here's the truly disquieting aspect. They have been operating this way since early childhood. Their brains are intrinsically wired differently, processing emotional information at intensity levels that would utterly overwhelm most people. Jung discovered that empaths do not consciously choose to absorb the emotions of others. Their nervous systems are fundamentally constructed for what he termed participation mystique, an unconscious merging with everything in their immediate environment. They possess no more ability to switch this off than you do to choose not to hear a sudden scream. Yet, society relentlessly teaches them to perceive this extraordinary gift as a debilitating disease. Every time they attempt to articulate what they inherently sense, they are dismissed as too sensitive or overly emotional. Consequently, they learn to retreat into silence, to question their own perceptions, and to silently bear everyone's darkness without a single complaint. And that very silence is, unequivocally, destroying them. Let's delve into a narrative illustration meticulously crafted from the recurrent patterns Jung observed throughout his extensive practice. We witness this dynamic manifest vividly in the story of a woman in her late 20s, whose appearance tragically made her seem decades older than her actual years. This composite example starkly embodies what Jung documented repeatedly. Her body was slowly shutting down, ravaged by years of ceaselessly absorbing her family's profound dysfunction. There was an alcoholic father whose nightly rages she implicitly absorbed, a perpetually depressed mother whose despair she carried like an inescapable second skin, and siblings who consistently utilized her as an emotional dumping ground whenever their own lives fragmented. She had become, quite literally, a human sponge for everyone's misery, and it was systematically eroding her, one cell at a time. But here's the crucial turning point that led Jung to realize he wasn't merely treating a sick individual. He was treating someone graced with an extraordinary gift, which had been cruelly weaponized against her. When Jung requested patients fitting this specific profile to describe the individuals in their lives, he anticipated confused, rambling accounts. What he received instead fundamentally reshaped everything he thought he understood about empaths. In case after case exhibiting this identical pattern, these individuals didn't merely feel people's emotions, they comprehended them with almost surgical precision. They could meticulously describe their father's childhood trauma simply by observing his subtle micro-expressions. They could accurately predict their mother's depressive episodes weeks before they ever materialized. They had mapped every person's intricate psychological patterns with an unnerving accuracy that genuinely unnerved Jung. They had never once utilized this profound knowledge because they had been indoctrinated into believing that seeing clearly was a transgression, that knowing too much rendered them dangerous. So they had spent their lives painstakingly feigning blindness, while their inherent gift slowly, insidiously poisoned them. Jung realized he was sitting across from dormant warriors, individuals possessing the innate power to see through every deception, every manipulation, every hidden agenda. But these powerful warriors had been dormant for so long that they had entirely forgotten their own existence. Traditional advice offered to empaths proves largely ineffective. Set boundaries, they're told. Practice self-care. Learn to say no. Jung experimented with all these conventional approaches with his empathic patients. None yielded genuine results. Not because the advice was inherently flawed, but because it utterly missed the fundamental core problem. You cannot effectively set boundaries when your entire nervous system is inherently designed to merge with others. You cannot genuinely practice self-care when you fundamentally don't know where your own self ends and other people begin. You cannot genuinely say no when your very identity is meticulously constructed around being the person who invariably says yes. Jung discovered that advising an empath to set boundaries is akin to telling someone to simply stop breathing. Their entire psychological structure is meticulously organized around absorbing and processing the emotional content of others. This isn't merely a poor habit they need to break. This is their core operating system. And here's the unsettling truth that frequently kept Jung awake at night. The traditional advice fails precisely because it treats empaths as if they are merely broken, normal people who simply need to become more normal. But empaths are not broken, normal people. They represent an entirely distinct species of consciousness, one that society fundamentally fails to understand and, consequently, cannot adequately accommodate. The genuine problem isn't that empaths feel too much. The true predicament is that they have been rigorously conditioned to believe their profound perceptions are somehow flawed or incorrect. They observe manipulation and are told they're imagining things. They sense someone's concealed rage and are instructed that they're being paranoid. They intuitively perceive dysfunction and are dismissed with, "Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. You're just creating drama." This creates what Jung termed the empath's curse. You are bestowed with extraordinary perception, yet you are punished every single time you attempt to utilize it. So you meticulously learn to gaslight yourself, to deny the undeniable truths you perceive, to apologize for your very existence. And that profound act of self-betrayal is the true, insidious poison. Jung observed something profoundly disturbing across his empath cases. Genuine healing didn't commence with meditation or boundaries or positive affirmations. It began invariably with a massive betrayal. Almost every empath who underwent a profound transformation under Jung's care had first been utterly shattered by someone they had completely trusted. A spouse's devastating infidelity, finally uncovered after years of nagging suspicion and resolute denial. A parent's inherent cruelty, at last unmasked after decades of rationalization and excuses. A friend's manipulative machinations, glaringly revealed after endless forgiveness. The betrayal itself wasn't the tragedy. The betrayal, in Jung's view, was the necessary medicine. Because here's Jung's profound realization. Empaths possess an almost infinite capacity to ignore their own suffering. They are fundamentally built to endure, but they cannot ignore undeniable, irrefutable proof that their perceptions were accurate all along. When the evidence becomes overwhelmingly clear, when the web of lies finally collapses, something profound within the empath irrevocably cracks open. Jung called this pivotal moment the clarity event, the instant when the suffocating fog lifts and they perceive with absolute crystal precision exactly how they have been exploited and used. Most observers might anticipate a complete breakdown at this juncture, a cascade of tears, a storm of rage, and utter collapse. Their betrayers, too, would likely expect such a chaotic emotional aftermath. They would be poised to exploit any emotional vulnerability. What transpired instead was something utterly unforeseen by anyone. The empaths became uncannily calm. They ceased defending themselves. They stopped attempting to explain their experiences. They stopped striving to make anyone understand, because they had finally shed the desperate need for external validation of what they could now see with absolute clarity. Jung eloquently described it as the precise moment the sleeping warrior opens her eyes. And when that warrior finally awakens, every single thing fundamentally shifts. Here is where Jung's research transcends the merely insightful and becomes truly formidable. To genuinely heal, the empath must undertake an action that society has spent their entire lives conditioning them to perceive as inherently evil. They must unearth their inner monster, not metaphorically, but quite literally. The empath must locate and acknowledge their capacity for coldness, for cruelty, for selfishness. They must consciously integrate what Jung termed the shadow, those suppressed aspects of themselves they have been rigorously taught to destroy. This isn't about transforming into a malevolent individual. This is about becoming a complete, fully integrated person. Jung observed that empaths who remain perpetually broken are those who cling to the belief that they must be utterly harmless to be considered good. They mistakenly equate kindness with inherent weakness, compassion with passive submission, and gentleness with victimhood. And that dangerous equation is slowly killing them. Because being harmless isn't a virtue. Being dangerous, yet consciously controlled, is the true objective. Jung meticulously watched his empathic patients unearth a truth that profoundly shocked them. They were not, in fact, weak. They had, unbeknownst to themselves, been diligently collecting exhaustive data on their abusers for years. Every manipulation tactic, every emotional trigger point, every psychological vulnerability. They possessed an intimate knowledge of precisely how to dismantle the individuals who had wounded them. They simply hadn't recognized they held this formidable knowledge because the idea of ever wielding it had never consciously occurred to them. This is what Jung designated the strategist's war room, a startling recognition that the empath's mind is not merely a record of victimhood, but rather an intricate arsenal of insights unconsciously amassed over a lifetime. And the precise moment they grasp this profound realization, everything irrevocably shifts. They finally comprehend that they have been playing a complex game of chess while everyone else erroneously believed it was mere checkers. They see that their perceived weakness was in fact a deeply restrained power. They recognize that they weren't shattered by abuse. They were meticulously studying it. And now they understand the game better than anyone else involved. This profound realization doesn't render them cruel, it makes them sovereign. They are no longer passive recipients of circumstance. They become the active architects of their own reality. The transformation Jung documented was rarely gradual. It was often instantaneous, One moment, the empath is drowning in everyone else's encroaching darkness. The very next moment, they are standing firmly on solid ground, observing others inadvertently drown in their own. Jung termed this profound shift individuation, the arduous yet ultimately liberating process of becoming a complete, self-actualized self, rather than remaining a mere fragment existing solely to serve others. And the very first hallmark of this individuation is the newfound capacity to observe without automatically absorbing. Consider how this manifests in practical application. The healed empath re-enters the very same room that once threatened to utterly destroy them. They still keenly feel the mother's desperation, the father's simmering rage, the siblings' corrosive jealousy. But now, instead of absorbing these potent emotions, they simply bear witness to them. They discern the underlying patterns. They grasp the intricate dynamics. They feel genuine compassion for the suffering they perceive. But crucially, none of it takes root within their own being anymore. Jung called this phenomenon the mirror effect. The awakened empath effectively transforms into a reflective surface, one that reveals people's own darkness back to them without uttering a single word. And here's why this is so remarkably potent. When you cease to absorb people's shadow content, they are inexorably forced to confront and carry it themselves. The alcoholic father can no longer utilize his daughter as an emotional refuse bin. The depressed mother can no longer siphon vital energy from her son. The manipulative friend can no longer feed on their empath's perpetual validation. And without the empath playing their formerly assigned enabling role, the entire dysfunctional system inevitably collapses. This is precisely why families and social groups often react with such intense rage when an empath undergoes this transformation. They haven't simply lost a loved one, they have lost their psychological waste disposal system. But the newly transformed empath doesn't engage with that rage. They simply observe it from a detached distance, curious, unmoved, and finally, profoundly free. Following the clarity event, almost every empath Jung studied entered what he termed the hermit phase. They withdrew from nearly everyone, not out of depression or defeat, but from a profound recognition that they desperately required space, far removed from the clamor of other people's psychological noise, to reconnect with and remember who they genuinely were. This withdrawal often terrified those around them. Family members would accuse them of unforgivable selfishness. Friends would claim they had changed for the worse. Partners would threaten abandonment if they didn't revert to their old, accommodating selves. But the empaths, for the first time in their lives, simply didn't care. They chose themselves. They chose silence over chaos. They chose solitude over dysfunction. They chose their own profound healing over everyone else's immediate comfort. And within that profound solitude, something truly extraordinary began to unfold. Jung observed that empaths in their hermit phase were not merely isolating themselves, They were, in fact, forging. Much like metal subjected to the intense heat of a kiln, the searing intensity of solitude burned away everything that wasn't essential. Everything they had absorbed from others, every false identity meticulously built upon being useful. What ultimately emerged from that transformative fire was someone entirely new, an individual who physically looked the same, but who operated from an entirely different psychological foundation. Someone who had learned the most profoundly dangerous lesson Jung could impart. You do not owe anyone unrestricted access to your energy. This was not selfishness. This was what Jung called selective empathy. The awakened empath still feels everything. They still perceive clearly. They still possess an immense capacity for deep compassion. But now, they consciously choose precisely where that compassion flows. They allocate their precious energy to individuals who genuinely deserve it, and purposefully withhold it from those who would carelessly squander it. This is the pivotal power move that reconfigures everything. Because when you render your empathy selective rather than an automatic, indiscriminate outflow, you cease to be a readily exploitable resource. You evolve into a conscious force that selectively enhances life precisely where you choose to direct it. You are no longer a universal battery everyone can simply plug into. You become a focused spotlight that illuminates only what you decide genuinely deserves light. Here's a discovery Jung made that sounds inherently impossible, yet proved consistently true in case after case. When the awakened empath finally re-engages with the world, predators can sense it instantly. The manipulators who once specifically targeted them suddenly avert eye contact. The energy vampires who previously drained them find spurious excuses to vacate the room. The narcissists who once effortlessly dominated them become strangely subdued in their mere presence. This isn't mere imagination. This is what Jung termed the predator's instinct. Predatory individuals are drawn to unawakened empaths like sharks to blood in the water. They can instinctively detect the lack of boundaries, the desperate need to please, the willingness to endure abuse in exchange for mere crumbs of approval. But awakened empaths emit an entirely different energetic frequency. They radiate something that makes predators profoundly uncomfortable. Not exactly fear, but more akin to an innate recognition. The predator instinctively senses that their usual tactics will be utterly ineffective, that this individual sees directly through their carefully constructed mask, and that engaging would be far more trouble than it's worth. And here's the truly beautiful part. The awakened empath doesn't have to actively do anything to generate this potent effect. They don't have to become aggressive or confrontational. Their mere presence is sufficient. Because they have integrated their shadow, they possess a profound understanding of their own capacity for darkness. And that self-knowledge renders them immune to manipulation. You cannot guilt-trip someone who has made peace with their own intrinsic selfishness. You cannot gaslight someone who utterly trusts their own profound perceptions. You absolutely cannot manipulate someone who has already seen every single game you could possibly attempt to play. The awakened empath has evolved into what Jung called a psychological architect, someone who can read, subtly influence, and intricately shape human systems with almost supernatural precision, not through cruelty or domination, but through a complete, unwavering consciousness of how psychology genuinely operates. Jung harbored a theory about empaths that he seldom discussed publicly. He believed they were being deliberately kept weak by societal systems that desperately required their inherent gifts, but simultaneously feared their latent power. Consider this. Empaths can instantly discern lies. They can sense manipulation before it has fully materialized. They can intuitively read the hidden dynamics that meticulously hold toxic systems together. If empaths were actively taught to trust, and indeed to strategically weaponize these extraordinary abilities, they would be utterly ungovernable. So society diligently teaches them the precise opposite. It indoctrinates them into believing their gift is a debilitating disorder, that seeing clearly is merely paranoia, that establishing strong boundaries is an act of selfishness, that saying no is inherently cruel. Every message an empath receives from birth is meticulously designed to convince them that their profound power is, in actuality, their greatest weakness. And most empaths never once question this pervasive programming. They spend their entire lives apologizing for their existence, consciously dimming their internal light so others can feel comfortable in their presence, sacrificing themselves on the altar of mere acceptability. But the empaths who finally awaken, the ones who endure profound betrayal and courageously integrate their shadow, they transcend into something society simply cannot control. They become sovereign beings who serve life on their own conscious terms. They are no longer passive participants in dysfunctional systems. They are powerful disruptors who inherently expose dysfunction simply by steadfastly refusing to enable it. And Jung firmly believed this was evolution in action, that awakened empaths represent the next profound stage of human consciousness. Beings who can feel everything without being utterly destroyed by it, see everything without becoming cynical, love deeply without irrevocably losing themselves. This is why the world, often unconsciously, strives so intensely to keep empaths perpetually asleep, because awakened empaths are inherently dangerous to the existing status quo. They are dangerous to narcissists who desperately require a constant supply. They are dangerous to manipulators who absolutely need willing victims. They are dangerous to systems meticulously built on people not seeing clearly, not because they are inherently cruel or destructive, but because they can no longer be used. So here's Jung's ultimate insight regarding how empaths truly heal themselves. It's not about becoming less sensitive. It's not about cultivating thicker skin. It's not about learning to care less. Healing truly happens when the empath profoundly realizes they were never, in fact, broken. They were simply unrefined. They were raw, untamed power, devoid of structure. Pure perception, lacking appropriate boundaries. Complete compassion, without crucial discernment. They didn't need to be fixed. They needed to be forged. And the forging process is undeniably brutal. It demands a betrayal painful enough to shatter every lingering illusion. It requires a solitude deep enough to reclaim and remember your authentic self. It necessitates shadow work challenging enough to consciously integrate your inherent capacity for darkness. It mandates a selectivity radical enough to cease bestowing your invaluable gifts upon people who do not deserve them. This is not a gentle, leisurely journey. This is a complete psychological death and rebirth. You don't heal from being an empath. You awaken into being an empath consciously. And once you truly awaken, you can never again return to slumber. You'll never again mistake people-pleasing for genuine kindness. You'll never again confuse self-sacrifice with authentic love. You'll never again believe that being utterly harmless makes you inherently good. You'll intuitively know that your immense power was always present, merely waiting for you to reclaim it. You'll understand that you were not a victim of your sensitivity. You were a warrior who had not yet learned to fight. The world relentlessly told you that you were too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too intense. But Jung's extensive research unveils the profound truth. You were never too much. Everyone else was simply not enough. Not enough consciousness to comprehend your extraordinary gifts. Not enough capacity to handle your profound depth. Not enough courage